you are never stuck. None of us are ever done growing. No one has to be defined by their past. You are in full control of changing whatever narrative you've been fed. You don't have to believe the narratives you've been fed. If you don't like it, you can change the narrative.
Welcome to Being the Change, the official podcast of James Madison University, brought to you by Madison Magazine. Each episode brings you stories of how members of the JMU community combine intellect with action to live lives of purpose and meaning. That's being the change.
What's up, JMU? Andy Perrine here. Welcome to Being the Change. Today's episode is yet another one about how JMU is evolving as a research institution, and we've got a guest on the show today who's conducting and exploring some really interesting research. Dr. Jennie Rosier is a professor of communication studies at JMU, and she's got something called the Relationships, Love, and Happiness Project that is fascinating in that it is real honest-to-goodness scholarship, but it's the kind of work that people can really understand and dial into and maybe even find some practical advice from. Dr. Rosier, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. Just a little background on Jennie. She's been to all the big R1s to get her degrees, Purdue, Auburn, Maryland, and she's wound up at JMU in the School of Communication Studies. And her work is a really interesting dive into how language affects our relationships, what we expect from our relationships, how we understand our world in terms of attachment and connections. Jennie, what led you to study relationships, love, and happiness?
When I was an undergrad at University of Maryland, I took a class on a whim called An Intro to Interpersonal Communication. And I took it with my best friend. So I was just going to take it with my friend and we were going to have fun. And the professor was incredible. And during the class, she said that people all around the world study dating and marriage. And I remember raising my hand and I said, "What? People do that as a job?" And she said, "Oh, yeah. There's thousands of people that they just study dating and marriage and how to make it better." And I said, "Well, that's really cool." And then I kept listening to the class and I got really interested in the topics. And then she had an assignment that had us teach a theory to the class. And it was the first time I had ever done a big speech in front of a lot of people for a long time. So I had done like 2 or 3 minute speeches in my, public speaking class, but I had to talk for 30 minutes. And so I stood in front of the class and I had prepared something wonderful and I went rogue and started telling stories to explain the concepts and just interweaving examples that I was thinking off the cuff.
Right.
And at the end of my presentation, my teacher came up to me and said, "You need to be a professor."
Oh.
And that's how I got here. So thanks, Dr. Laura Janusik.
What a formative experience.
It was.
Well, then tell us, so that was a starburst in your young life. Then what were the phases of your understanding of this reality of research? There's a entire discipline I'll call subjective well-being, which explores happiness. How did you get into it?
So I really focused the beginning of my career studying dating and marriage. I was fascinated to figure out what are the communication skills needed to have healthy, happy, romantic relationships. And then at Purdue for my PhD, I took a class on attachment. And I had never heard of attachment before. And I took an entire 16-week course, graduate level course on attachment theory. And I realized that I couldn't study romantic relationships without studying parent-child relationships, and that they were so interconnected that I was a fool to think that I could study one without the other.
Right.
And so then it became my life's work to study how the ways that we speak to our children becomes their inner voice, which then impacts how they navigate life and communicate with others, which impacts how they create and maintain romantic relationships, which then impacts how they communicate with their own children, and the cycle continues. So it's very much an emphasis in interpersonal neurobiology and how these internal working models are developed in our brains from communication from our parents.
Well, and it's not all about how parents communicate to students, though. It's about how parents communicate to each other.
Oh, sure.
With the child bearing witness, too,
Yes,
isn't it? Yeah.
yes. So, children grow up seeing how their parents communicate with one another, and it creates these templates for how they expect to be communicated with when they're in a romantic relationship as well.
Well, it's really interesting, and our listeners will be fascinated to know that that discovery of the idea of attachment, while Dr. Rosier was doing her work at her PhD work at Purdue, now has sort of rung down through time. And there's a course in the JMU catalog. There is. SCOM 414.
Yes.
Attachment Communications. What do students learn in that?
Oh, man. They learn a lot. And I think any alumni who took that course are forever changed from it. We start at the cradle and we end at the grave. And for 16 weeks, we learn about how attachment, why it's important, what the benefits are, what the consequences of insecure attachment are, how it's formed, how it changes, how it creates these internal working models in our brains, which changes the architecture of our brains and causes us to communicate in certain ways. I mean, they learn so much about themselves and how they got to where they are, who they are, and where they want to go in life. And so it's the culmination of everything that I've done up to this point, and I was so thankful that I was allowed to create that course. And it is a very successful, very popular course in our department.
One of the fascinating things about your research is compared to, say, lab research, you just described in how students discover themselves in this course on attachment. What was the moment that led you to realize that there was a possibility for an outreach project? Because you've got the Relationships, Love, and Happiness Project, and how did you imagine turning your scholarship and your teaching into an outreach project?
So I think when I was an undergrad and I was learning that people studied this, I remember thinking, well, why don't more people know about these people who are studying this stuff? And it came from a very practical place. Like, I want to understand research, but as an undergrad, research just seemed so muddy and highbrow. I'm a first-generation college student, and I just thought, I can't understand all this stuff. There has to be a way to make it so that real people can understand this complex information. And so I used to have this website and blog called Jen's Love Lessons when I was a master's student. I created that. But then blogging became not that popular anymore. So I created the Relationships, Love, Happiness Project on Instagram. And I really just try to explain difficult to understand information in a easy to understand way and make it relatable to the average swiper, who's on Instagram. And it really just comes from this desire for me to get the information to the people.
Well, you've also got a podcast called the Love Matters Podcast with Dr. Jennie Rosier. And I listened to a couple episodes, and what's really lovely is that you basically get testimony from folks and then pull apart their experience as a child or as a person in a relationship and describe how their lived experience and their current situation can be explained through your scholarship.
Sure.
Tell our listeners a little bit how you got to that point.
Yes. So the podcast was actually born out of the pandemic because I had to make all my classes online. And so I thought, I'm going to record all of these lecture videos for my students. And so I started creating lecture videos for my romantic relationships class and for my research methods class. And then I thought, I don't want to just keep making these lecture videos. What else could I do? So I decided that maybe I'll create a podcast where they listen to an episode each week, and that's how they get the information. Right. So the first season is, 14 or so episodes of the science of attachment. And if you listen to season 1, you are taking the attachment class. So you are literally taking the course. So it was a win-win for me, right? So it satisfied this way for my students to learn the information, but it also satisfied my core value of getting the information to the people. Right. So anyone could listen to it for free and learn this stuff that I was teaching these students at JMU.
Well, it's fascinating that your pedagogy was forced to evolve because of the pandemic, and now it's more readily available.
Oh, yeah.
Who do you think are the audiences that might benefit from listening to this?
I think anyone can benefit from learning about attachment, whether you are a young person who has never dated before, or you are married, you're thinking about having children, you have been married a long time, you are about to have grandchildren. I really think that anyone can benefit from learning more about themselves, because that's really what attachment is. It's about learning more about who you are and also creating some empathy for other people, for understanding, maybe they're not a jerk. Maybe they're having a hard time, right? That whole she's giving me a hard time because she's having a hard time idea. And so anyone could benefit from learning about attachment. And my listeners are widely different in terms of their demographics. I'm always surprised when I look at the analytics.
Well, and this isn't just about romance or getting along. Healthy relationships have huge impact on the rest of our lives in many different ways. And the corollary to that is unhealthy relationships have major impacts. Describe the importance of healthy relationships in our lives.
They're everything. They're the thing that matters the most. The relationships that we have, especially the close ones that we have with other people, whether it's our parents, our children, our romantic partner, our friends, our colleagues, those are the things that are meaningful. I tell my students frequently that I love you guys, but this isn't it for me. Like, this isn't the most important thing in my life. And it may seem like this is the most important thing in my life because I talk about attachment nonstop. I talk about romantic relationships nonstop. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about this topic. But when I leave here and I go home with my 4 kids and my husband, that's what actually matters. And that's what I hope at the end of my life. They're like, she was a good mom. She was a good friend. She was a great wife. She was a great daughter. If people think I was a great teacher too, that's great. But and a great researcher, that's tertiary. But it's those relationships that really matter.
I'm sure that many of our listeners agree with you, Jennie, about the central focus in our lives being who we love and who we care for, and not what we do. In America, oftentimes what we do is misconstrued with who we are, and relationships are really where it's at. Speaking of that, can you give us some examples of how the project or the blog or your research or your teaching has actually opened somebody's eyes to a reality that they didn't understand, or expectations they didn't know they held for relationships?
I have so many stories that I could tell. We would be here all day. But the stories that I love the most actually do happen in the classroom. So something that I tell my students on the first day of attachment specifically is some of you are going to be very upset this semester, and that's okay. You know, I usually have one student crying every class period, at least one. And that's okay, and we will work through those things together. But what's always fascinating to me is when someone who doesn't participate the whole semester, and it looks as though it's not hitting them, and then at the end of the semester, I have the final exam is a what I've learned speech and how the topic is important to them, and they can talk about anything they want. There's no parameters. So some of them get up and they talk about how one sentence that I said in November changed their lives, you know, and that they want to talk for a few minutes about that sentence. And some of them say, oh, there were 5 things that really impacted me. And a lot of them, though, get up and tell a story about how they saw their life before they took the class and now how they see their life and that it's different. And the ones that always shock me are the students who the whole semester it looked like they didn't care, like they were just taking a class to take a class. And a lot of times it's men. And one in particular, I had a burly gentleman who sat in the back corner and slept a lot and never participated. And this is a big participating class. So he never participated. He never came to my office hours. He never talked to me about anything before class or after class. His assignments were mediocre that he submitted. I think he ended up having a C in the class. I mean, he just did the class. And at the end, when he gave his speech, he stood in front of 30 of his peers and reenacted a play that he had written, which was shocking.
That's amazing.
And he started it off with he was on the phone, and he had his cell phone. He pretended to be on the phone. He was like, "Mom, I had such a great day," you know. And he starts telling this story about his great day, and then he puts the phone down and he acts sad, but he doesn't really tell us what Mom said on the other end. And then he goes through things that this class surprised him, and he was very shocked by how it made him feel.
At this point.
Yes, and then he's in monologue, and then at the very end, he picks up the phone again and he goes, "Dad, I had a really great day." And then he switches the phone to the other side and he goes, "Great day. You're such a," you know, and cusses at him as if his father is cussing at him. And everyone in the class is like, and it became clear that the monologue he was saying was that his parents were not great parents, and that's how he got to where he was, and that he felt a lot of shame growing up, and he wasn't good enough, and that he wasn't, you know, cool enough and smart enough, and all of that started from the beginning. And when he put the phone down, he said, "Yeah, I know." And then he started crying, and his speech was over, and everyone was clapping. And I just thought, what? This is incredible. This man that probably would have never confronted any of that did this in my little class in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And I mean, I hope he's doing great, but I'm sure he is. You know, I'm sure he's had more time to self-reflect. And it's moments like that. And I think any of my past students would say, "Oh, I remember this one speech at the end." They would all remember a person or two that gave this amazing speech about how the class impacted them. And that's what's really important for me.
Well, from a practical perspective, it sounds like the young man understood himself better.
Yeah.
What is the potential takeaway that you're not a psychologist, you're not a counselor, but there is potentially a transformational impact on somebody that has that realization that this young man did. What are some of the takeaways for those kind of revelations?
Well, I mean, last few weeks of the semester are spent talking about how to get better, like how to improve your life. And so I hope that they take the how to become more secure to heart, and they see the benefits of like these small, tiny baby steps that they can take to improve their lives. And I also like really encourage them, like, don't let this class be it. Like, this should be the beginning of you becoming a student of yourself. This should be the beginning of you in your healing process. And, you know, we talk about other books they can read and other classes they can take online, and I give them all of those resources. So I really think that a lot of them, if not almost all of them, take this as a beginning point to improve their lives in the future.
It's almost as if it's a portal to step through, and the revelation at the other side is that emotions are not fixed realities. Relationships are not fixed realities, and that language and action actually are ways to transform them.
It's amazing. I love it.
It's like a secret power.
It is. It's great.
Well, there's so much practical application to your scholarship, Jennie. It's really fascinating, and I think it's particular to the kind of work that is endemic at JMU as opposed to big R1s, in that it's human and it's practical, and there's a reality there that people can understand.
Yes.
And how do you feel about being a faculty member here at JMU who went to Purdue, who went to Auburn, and you're at JMU doing this research and teaching these students?
JMU really is the happiest place on earth. I remember hearing that several years ago. I've been here for 15 years, and I have loved every single minute of it.
Right.
There's never been a time where I've thought, this place is unfair. I don't like it here. When I was at the R1s, even though I wasn't a faculty member, I had those moments frequently. And even I remember telling my husband when I applied here, I said, listen, I'm very jaded from all my time at Purdue, especially. And if this JMU thing doesn't work out, I'm going to give it a year. And if it doesn't work out, like, I'm done. I'm going to go be a realtor. And he said, okay. And none of that has ever happened. JMU is incredible. I'm allowed to teach what I want to teach and research what I want to research. And I'm not, stuck with these harsh deadlines. And it's very just inclusive on whatever it is that is your passion. And I've been able to really hone my passion here.
Well, and also there's something about JMU that it attracts intensely social people, both faculty and students. So every one of your courses, every one of your classes is kind of like a focus group for your research.
It is definitely. And I've created full lines of research based on conversations with students.
Oh, that's amazing. What a virtuous cycle. Well, for our listeners, how can they learn more about Relationships, Love, and Happiness Project, and where can they find it? How can they engage it?
So on Instagram, I'm just at Relationships, Love, Happiness. You can follow me there and engage with me there. And then my podcast is the Love Matters podcast with Dr. Jennie Rosier. And you can take one of my classes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and listening to the podcast is like taking the attachment course.
It is like
right?
taking the course, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jennie Rosier,
Thank you.
sharing your research with us. And even more so, thank you for turning the light bulb on for our students in a way that is not just intellectual, but is personal.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, listeners, if you've got an idea for a future episode or just want to get in touch, you can reach us at beingthechange@jmu.edu. And until next time, go Dukes.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to hear more stories about how members of the JMU community are being the change. Dive deeper and explore countless other stories at jmu.edu/Madison Magazine. Go Dukes!
The Being the Change podcast was conceived by Jim Heffernan, editor of Madison Magazine, and me, Andy Perrine, head of JMU Marketing. Thanks to Jenna Polk and her team at the Rose Library Studios, where the show is recorded by Cody Troyer, Steve Adderton,
and Olive Santos, all of the crazy talented JMU photo video team, who then produced the final episodes at the Ice House in downtown Harrisonburg. Original music by 2019 alumnus Neil Perrine. You can find the Being the Change podcast on all the popular platforms where we hope you'll like, share, and subscribe.